Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do. In this episode, I interview Guy Tsakalakis, president of AttorneySync, who's become the trusted North Star for law firms navigating the most volatile shift in digital marketing history. And his message right now is stop over-relying on Google and AI and start building your brand. Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm Tom Martin, your host. I'm thrilled today to have on Guy Tsakalakis. Got that right?
You did. Great job.
Cool.
Great to see you, Tom.
Yeah, great to see you, Guy. And he is the president of AttorneySync. He is also the co-host of Lunch Hour Marketing with Conrad Sam, and that's amazing. You have such a long track record of doing right by lawyers, helping to educate them about marketing and all of the changes that are going on, which are heavy right now with AI. And so I'm really happy to have you here. We've known each other for years, and I'm hoping to get to know you a little better on this episode and share that with everyone who's watching. How's it going?
Going great. It's great to see you. I was trying to think back, but gosh, we have been friends for a long time, and grateful for your hosting of the tech show Super Dinners with Patrick, and so grateful to be a part of that. But gosh, we've known each other for it's got to be over a decade easily.
Yeah, it's been a long time. And reflecting on the change that's happened in the past decade has just been crazy. I can't imagine how it's changed your world because marketing, especially for lawyers, I think probably was a hard road for a long time. And then lately, the way Google's been changing its algorithm, and more importantly now, it's not just the algorithm, it's the AI overview that gives at the top has had an impact. How do you feel about how things are going?
What an exciting time to be alive. I think if you like change, you're probably happier than you've ever been. If you don't like change, you're probably terrified for a lot of different reasons. I happen to like change. I tend to thrive in chaos, as they say. And I got into this business in the first place because I like solving problems and issues, and it keeps me on my toes and never a boring day.
And you're definitely like the OG of law firm marketing. Like, couldn't tell looking at you. Like over here, I got the gray and salt and pepper going on. But you've been at it for 18 years now, right? With Attorney Sync?
Yeah. We founded Attorney Sync in 2008, and I officially left law practice in September of 2008. So yeah, it's been a minute, and I'm super grateful. It must be from my mom. It's funny. We were just talking about my hair earlier today with my business partner, and my younger brother, which we can talk about. Poor guy. He lost his hair at a very young age. My mom's dad had no hair, so I don't know. Somewhere in the genes, it just worked out for me, and so I'm very, very grateful.
So no Rogaine, no you know.
Nothing. I've seen a couple grays creeping in, and I will say, probably oversharing here, but I've been noticing a lot of hair growth on my ears and my top of my nose, and so I'm getting some stragglers popping up. But so far, it's holding. I'm thinning a little bit, but it's holding together up top.
Well, like definitely thinning a little bit here, and yeah, the hair for men as we get older popping up in places we don't intend them to be. Yeah, that's a pain in the butt. Sorry for oversharing too. But I'd love to learn more about your origin story, Guy, because I know that we have known each other for years and we've talked, but never really gotten into it. And so I'd like to ask you, like, right now, where are you sitting? What city are you in right now?
I'm in Birmingham, Michigan, which is actually my hometown. I was in Chicago for many years. In fact, we probably met through professional things in Chicago, and I lived in Chicago from 2008 to 2020. But family, COVID, yada, yada, yada. My wife and I decided to move back to Southeast Michigan, and it's a great place to raise a family. And it was really surreal when I first came back. I was having like deja vu all the time because it's like this is where I spent all my childhood. But it's been really nice to be closer. My sister's here, and so my kids and her kids and doing the cousin stuff, and my mom's still here, so I get to spend some quality time with her. And my mother-in-law is only an hour and a half away, so it seemed like a natural progression if we were going to leave Chicago. But we miss Chicago. We loved Chicago so much. Thought we were going to be there forever. Just wasn't in the cards.
Yeah, deja vu all over again, huh? It's great to come home. And so, did you grow up in Birmingham?
I did. I was born in Detroit. We'll go all the way back to my existence. Like Detroit proper for the first couple of years, and then I think we moved when I was like maybe 2 or 3. So yeah, I've been here pretty much my whole life, except when I moved away for school and moved away when I started Attorney Sync because my business partner and his wife wanted to live in Chicago. And I was like, let's do it.
So, describe for everyone who's not as familiar with Birmingham as you are, like, what is that like in Michigan? Like, was it when you were growing up like a smaller town, or what was the feel and vibe of it?
So it's a little bit smaller. It's a suburb of Detroit. If you people that are going to look it up, like Oakland County and Birmingham in general, it's a affluent suburb of Detroit. It's funny because again, people make attribution errors. Everybody thinks, "Oh, you were like must have been super wealthy when you were little," but I wasn't. I was a single parent mom who was a special needs educator. And I felt very grateful just from a lot of the opportunities and privileges that I was provided living in Birmingham and growing up here. But I didn't come from a lot of money, although a lot of my peers and a lot of the families here in the community, it's an affluent community, but it's a got a nice little downtown with shops. Great. It's known for its public schools, which I think is a lot of the reasons people choose to live here. Well, I think the tagline is it's a walkable city. So we had a lot of parks and stuff. So really great place to have childhood myself, and feel very fortunate that my kids will be able to experience that. But like everything else, there's trade-offs, and I would say, certainly coming from Chicago, culturally, not as diverse, not as much exposure to people from all walks of life. So I think that is a trade-off that we try to be mindful of in terms of getting outside the quote unquote bubble. But it is a nice, it's a nice little town.
And tell us about your family. Like, do you have a lot of brothers and sisters? Where did you fall in that order? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, so I'd say we're a relatively small family, but very tight knit. As I mentioned, my mom, she did all the raising of us, and it's me. I was firstborn, and then I've got a younger brother and sister who are fraternal twins that are about 2.5 years younger than me.
So I've seen this be true in my two daughters and a lot of siblings, that the older sibling happens to be the more practical one who kind of does things by the book and gets things done. Do you think that fits you?
Nailed me. And not to mention, and I'm not a big astrology person, but people tell me I am a Capricorn, and apparently that's a very practical, by the book reasoning sun sign. So yes, all of those things. And I think also, we'll talk a little bit about experiences that shape me, but firstborn son in a single parent, single mom household. I did, at least my experience is I felt, call it a responsibility that I think a lot of other kids probably didn't feel, but it shaped me, and it's all part of my journey. And so I'm grateful for those experiences because it'd be hard for me to separate my identity from those experiences.
And speaking of that, tell us more about your relationship with your mom and like what she was doing, and if any of that had any influence on you.
Oh man, I mean, my mom was my first hero, still my biggest hero. It's funny now that I'm a parent. My kids are 9 and 7, and I think back, and we talked about it, some of the challenges that her situation brought to all of us. But gosh, I don't know how she did it. 3 kids under 5 by herself. I'm like, I don't understand how you did this. Like, it's hard enough with two parents and 2 kids, and so. But yeah, my mom was a huge influence on me. I'm also super grateful. She was a master's degree in early childhood development. So it's like, if you're going to get an education on shaping young people, she had that degree. And I think also just kind of naturally, just really great mom all the way around. I couldn't have, people say, they've got the best mom, but I truly have the best mom. And she was very, very instrumental in shaping and guiding the person that I am today.
What's her name?
Susan.
Susan.
Yes.
Shout out to Susan.
Shout out to
Um,
Susan. I tell Susan all the time. And that's another thing, too. I'll tell people, like, I'm a big gratitude person. Like, don't wait to tell people how grateful you are for them. So that'll be one of my takeaways from this conversation.
Absolutely. I think, especially for us in the legal world, like tend to work a little too much, work too hard, and keeping it real with the people that we love and care about the most is really important.
It is to me.
When you were growing up there in Birmingham and you went to high school, like, did you have an idea of becoming a lawyer? Like a lot of people that I talk to that are lawyers, there's two kinds of us, right? Like one is that from a very young age, oh, well, you like arguing, you probably would make a good lawyer. Or, there's just a certain thing that kind of broadcasts that. Versus some of us are like, oh, like I went to university, I got a philosophy degree. Okay, what are you going to do to survive? So I ended up going to law school. What was your story?
So I've got flavors of both of those camps. I would say at a very young age, my mom still brings this up, but at a very young age, she thought that I was going to be a judge. I think I have a intrinsic sense of justice that really permeates a lot of different stuff in my life, but I never really felt the calling that way. I mean, I recognized it in myself. If I saw kids picking on other kids, I'd be the first one to step in and be like, "That's not right," and that kind of stuff. But I never really was like had the mindset of like I'm going to be a judge or I'm going to be a lawyer. Very grateful that I was able to pick up concepts pretty quickly, and so I'll admit the downside of that was I was not a great student in terms of discipline and studying. I was more of the type of student that could figure out how to do well on the final, leading up to the final, but not great homework habits. And in fact, it wasn't really until law school that I developed much better study habits and just being a student in general. I was always really attracted to. If I think back, I think if I had to like pin one thing down, I was a person that was. I thought I was going to be a million things, but I think if there's one current theme that was maybe the closest to like I'm going to do that, I was really interested in physics, and so I thought for just a period of time I thought I was going to be a physicist. I excelled in science; it was probably my strongest subject. But I never really, by the time I graduated high school, I didn't really know what I was going to do. I started out as a computer science major. I was, like I said, really interested in science. I thought this is so to date myself a little bit here. I was a freshman in college in '97. In fact, we had people came in. I went to the University of Michigan, Go Blue, and we had people that came in from Google during that time. Some part of my education, I don't remember exactly what the dates were. So if people are trying to do the math there and calling me out about the dates, I might get a little fuzzy there. But somewhere time in during that computer science education, we had people from these tech companies coming in to talk about search and that kind of stuff. And so, it's pretty close to the forefront in terms of, at least as a student, I wasn't out working yet, but I had exposure to that. And the thing though because eventually, obviously, well, maybe it's not obvious, but eventually I switched majors, and that was primarily because when I got to the point where I was like in rooms of people just like coding, I was like, even though I'm like intellectually interested in it, I didn't
Mm.
see myself sitting in a room behind a computer hammering out code. It just that part of it didn't sound as appealing to me, and so, like you, I switched to philosophy, and I would not trade it for the world. I loved my philosophy education, and I even toyed the idea of going into academia as a philosophy educator. But by the time I got out of school, I graduated philosophy degree, and maybe with some of that sense of justice. I also had a mentor that was my offensive coordinator on my high school football team. That was a trial lawyer, so certainly he played a role in shaping some of that. But I was like, I'm going to go to law school, and I went to work for him straight out of law school, and so that was my journey to becoming a lawyer.
Wow. Okay, a lot to unpack there. So,
Yeah,
well, let me ask you about the football team. What was that
yeah.
like? How did you guys do?
We held our own for a suburban, undersized football program, and I actually very fortunate. I've stayed in touch with some of the coaches, but in particular, my mentor is the offensive coordinator Matt Turner, who's an attorney here in Michigan, and I just had lunch with our head coach Doug Frazier, who was very, very like I was, talk about someone that really embodied the leadership and the sense of being a part of something. Like I was hooked. And look, my dad wasn't around, and so the male role models in my life as a young man were that much more important to me. And I would say that I was so hooked. I went all in, and I think even, despite a lot of the things that I've done in my life, whether it's graduating from the University of Michigan that I'm very proud of, becoming a lawyer, going through law school, starting my own business. Like I went so all in on high school football, and it was so wrapped up in my identity. And people laugh now because I'm 5'9", buck 75, buck 80. Like, how did you played football? But I was really committed to it. There was this award that they had called the Chuck Skinner Award. It was named after a former coach, and they gave that award to the person who showed the most commitment to the program. And like every year, like that was the thing that I wanted to win, and it was great. I was grateful that I won that. But my buddies and in my kind of like ancillary peers from high school, like they would know me as like a total meathead. Like I was just super into high school football. Like that was my identity to a large extent.
Well, that kind of enthusiasm, it carries through to everything that we love, that we dedicate ourselves to. And so it's just that's awesome that you had that experience. Also, that to unpack something else is that when you were looking at computer science, sometimes I think we might get caught up in something that we find interesting or that we just kind of continue down that road. But the fact that you step back from it and you're looking at like, okay, what is this lived experience like? Right? And like, do I want that? Does that fit with me? And then making a decision based on that, not just the abstract or the it makes sense to do this. And so also another thing to unpack is the philosophy. Like, there's for everyone out there who's not as familiar, there's different types of philosophy and different camps and schools of thought. Was there one that you focused on?
Well, I actually because it was I guess it was a Bachelor of Arts in Philosophy. So I got a survey of a lot of different types of philosophy. Some of the classes that came to mind, we had this philosophy of the mind class that I really enjoyed, but it was really soup to nuts. Like we covered ancient philosophy, we covered more continental philosophy, we even covered some modern philosophy. John Rawls was a theory of justice was one that really stuck with me. But I got to tell you, and it's going to sound like a cliche because I know everybody's on it right now. But I think the thing, I guess, call it a philosophy, but the ism that resonates with me most, and I've been very vocal about this in other places online, is really Stoicism. And even though it's really coming back into it's more accessible, I think, than it's ever been. The deep themes from Stoicism, things like memento mori, remember death, being grateful for the time that you have because you're not promised tomorrow, or premeditatio malorum, like, being prepared for the worst but hoping for the best, and amor fati, like loving your journey. Like those things to me are, they speak so much truth. And so I find myself continuing to come back to that specific type of philosophy, I guess.
And, the Latin there, signaling that has been, these thoughts have been with humanity for like a long time. Uh,
Amazing. I mean, it's
yeah.
amazing to think thousands of years ago, grappling with a lot of these same struggles and finding language and truth that has persisted. Standing the test of time is, I think we sometimes, as our society, don't give it enough value. That these things that have been tried and true, that there's a reason that they still come back up, and that we still find value in them.
Yeah, I think, and I've seen you post before, Memento Mori. That's definitely something I think that runs through, at least I think, like our community, like, this kind of group of do-gooders wanting to leave a positive mark on the world and make a dent in the universe, as Jobs used to say. So then you do go to law school, and when you go there, is there anything in particular that you were focusing on that maybe like following through on, your love of justice? or maybe a experience you had working with a professor with, an externship or something that kind of made you feel like this is the right place to be?
Yeah, I think trial advocacy was my favorite class. I was enamored by. I think some of it too is that I love history, and so law school is essentially a continuing history lesson. And so I think like when I think back at some of my favorite classes, constitutional law was one of my favorite classes, but really trial advocacy was the thing that I seem to have a little bit of a knack for it, and I really enjoyed it. And so that's when I started to, because when I went to law school, I really didn't know. I was like, I have this sense of justice. I think that being able to help people navigate the complexities of law resonated with me. But like the real decision to be like a quote unquote trial lawyer didn't happen until I had trial advocacy, and I think got some positive feedback that I showed some proclivity for it. I had this mentor who was a trial attorney, and so the picture started coming together. And I had tremendous respect for not only my mentor but just really good trial lawyers that are out there doing their thing on behalf of people, and dealing with some of the most difficult times of their life, to be able to put to be able to be their advocate, to be their defender. And I think it's connecting dots here. It's not hard to imagine that someone that came from a situation where I had to take on more of a leadership role. I had to, even if it was all in my head, because it wasn't like we weren't safe, but even if it was in my head, feeling like taking care of my brother and sister, taking on some of those responsibilities early on, I think that definitely shaped some of that desire to be able to help people in other contexts. And so by the time trial advocacy happened, I was like, I'm going to be a trial lawyer. Like that's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to study. And turns out that feeling only lasted about 2 years.
Okay, what's the story there? What happened? Because like you had your coach that was a trial lawyer, then you go into law school and that's what you're pursuing, and you have this sounds to me like a pretty good experience with it, and it kind of aligns with everything else. What took you in a different direction?
So I had a great experience. I was very grateful. It was baptism by fire, and it was a small plaintiffs firm, so I got to participate. I mean, I was motion call. We had I think coincidentally, because I don't think I'm going to say this, and people that know plaintiff trial are going to be like, "You had that many trials your first year out?" But I think we had like 3 trials at least that I can recall. Not that I was handling myself, but that I was co-chairing or supporting lead attorney on. And so I had a lot of courtroom experience in that first year, and I loved it. That was the thing that was super exciting to me. There were some other aspects of being a trial lawyer that I didn't love so much. And this is before, this is paper times, Tom. We
Yeah,
were lots of
paper
paper,
time.
medical records, deposition transcripts are all on paper, red ropes, nothing, not very, but in fact, I laugh because I think the practice management tool that we were on was Time Matters. So for folks that might remember that, I think it might have been a Lexus product, but I don't even know if that's still out there. And it was funny because even then, with my technical background, the firm leadership is asking me like, "Hey, should we be exploring other options?" I'm like, "Yes." And the other thing that happened was I was also, as the new lawyer, I was tasked with what should we be doing to market the firm, grow the firm. And so I spent a lot of time researching what was available. And I think that's what started to kind of pique my interest about doing something else, was that I was like, gosh, it's not that great. There's not a lot of great options. Lawyers seem, most of these lawyers, they don't really think about their firm, the practice of law, as a business at all. They don't really think about marketing. Just do good work, and people talk about you and send you more clients. And so as I started to do that research, it started opening all my eyes to like this whole world of like search engines. And back at the time, there was Total Attorneys and Legal Match and Legal Fish, I think was another one but a lot of more like pay per lead services. And there was a lot of it just seemed like a lack of opacity, or excuse me, a lack of transparency. Like you don't really, it was a lot. It seemed like a lot of like black box stuff. And eventually, I was actually living with a good friend of mine from undergrad who ended up becoming my founding partner at Attorney Sync. He was working at another friend of ours company that did pay per lead for at home services, so like replacement windows, home improvement projects. And this is back when clicks on Google were still a nickel. And in
Yeah.
fact, even during law school, I went and worked there for a little bit, just to kind of pay some of the bills. In fact, we went to the gym together, and that was really the genesis. We started having these conversations of like, I'm like, I'm researching internet marketing stuff. He's doing internet marketing in a different vertical. And I'm like, maybe there's a business here that for us to be able to get to start. So when I think about it, I'm like, well, what was really the driving force? I think it was that entrepreneurial itch in conjunction with I was going to be able to do this with, one of my best friends in the whole world, and that I could tell that it was the type of thing that was going to be a lot of problem solving, and that frankly, not to be, this isn't intended to be condescending, but there was a huge opportunity to teach lawyers about this stuff because they just didn't seem to be thinking about it. And I just kind of thought like, it's going to be easy to take a lot of these firms from like 0 to 1 because they're literally doing nothing right now. And so the kind of culmination of those types of things. The other thing that was big for me was I was starting to get, I had enough maybe maturity or self awareness to be mindful about like wanting to design my life. And I started to look down the road at not necessarily at the with the lawyers that I was working with, but trial lawyers in general. It's an extremely demanding profession. There's a reason that there are substance abuse issues, and they tend to index high in trial law, issues with family. If you've ever been on trial, you know how just every dimension of your being is taxed. It is physically, spiritually, emotionally draining. And I just thought like, is this going to be, am I going to burn out on this? And so I think it was kind of combination of those two things where I was like, I have this opportunity to try something new. I've got this entrepreneurial itch. I can design my business. I have a lot more control over designing my life when I'm the boss versus, being a young trial attorney. Like I'm at the mercy of the existing organizational inertia and the leadership and all that kind of stuff. And look, I had to pay my, I knew I was going to be paying my dues. Like it was going to be years before I was like really good at that craft. And so anyway, I think all those factors kind of played into this role of like, we can design this business. I can do it with my really close friend. There seems like there's a pretty good opportunity there. I have a built-in network of people that I already, whether it was from computer science and some of the lawyers that I had met, it just seemed like a good opportunity for me to make the jump. And so finally did that in, I think technically I gave notice in 2027, but it's 2027, 2028, somewhere around there. Or, excuse me, 2007,
18.
2008, 2008, not even, I was way ahead. So 2008, which is funny because like a lot of people say that's not a great time to start a business because we were having the financial implosion that was going on. But I was completely oblivious to that. I was like, I'm starting a business. That doesn't really affect me. So
And
that's how
that
that
friend
went
that you
down.
started the business with is
Jeff Berman, he's my business partner at Attorney Sync. And in fact, he's my partner at, we went on to found a second agency outside of legal altogether. And so Jeff and I founded Attorney Sync originally. We convinced my brother, which again, I'm very grateful. One, that my brother even wants to be business partners with me, but also that I had the opportunity to convince him to leave his job. He was at a big media buying agency, like a WPP agency. So we founded another agency with him. And so the three of us are all three principals at Attorney Sync and EPL Digital, which is another agency. And then, we do some very speculative legal tech investing and advising. I've been very grateful through the relationships that I built over the years that people trusted us and wanted to bring us into that. So my brother and Jeff are like they're my ride or dies, and and I'm grateful that I'm on this journey with them in the business context too.
that's awesome that you get to not only to work with them, but like you get along, so it's okay. Like it works out.
Yeah, and look, and people always say that to me. They're like, "I can't believe you're in business with your brother and your friend." And look, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, but but I really, when you think about it, at least in my experience, it really just comes down to trust. And I know people who have had really bad experiences with partners in general, whether they're friends or siblings or not. And so I'm just so grateful that we have that level of trust and we have that kind of relationship where we can have hard conversations and still be able to also acknowledge and compartmentalize that regardless of what happens, you're still my Jeff, you're still my really close friend. And Athen, you'll be my brother no matter what.
You know, it also brings to mind for me like another example of where you kind of stepped back and you took the lay of the land, like in the transition from being a trial lawyer to pursuing marketing, you looked into yourself about like, what am I comfortable with? What am I good at? Like, what would I feel good about doing? And then pursuing that versus many of us could have been caught up in like the inertia, the momentum, the, maybe the high that you get from going from being involved in a trial. Like it can, like, but it can be unhealthy. And there is a lot of that with attorneys that are trial lawyers because it is such a rough and tumble type of practice area that it could really wear on you. So kudos to you for pursuing something that positive, and it looks like I mean, you've done an amazing job. One thing that's really impressed me about your approach, Guy, is that you are really good at communicating things in a way that is accessible, especially for lawyers. That makes sense. That isn't, using the catchphrases of marketing. In fact, a lot of times you like point out, like, here's the catchphrase, here's the hype phrase that people use, and this is what it really means, or this is the reality behind it.
Well, thank you for that. That's what I'm trying to do.
And, well, another phrase that you have, another catchphrase that comes to mind is meh.
Yeah.
And where, meh, like,
Yep.
where does that come from?
Great question. So it started out, the original meh was meh links. And the source of that was that it was an SEO catchphrase. So for people that have no idea what SEO is, search engine optimization, trying to get your law firm's website to appear in search results. Um, Google's a link based, or historically was a link based algorithm page. You can go look up PageRank, but essentially like hypertext links pointing to and from pages are that's the original magic of Google in terms of organizing the web. And so throughout the years, though, people in the SEO community would try to identify different ranking factors. So, you talk about like meta tags and page titles and headings and content and URL architecture and all this kind of stuff. But I always found, and again, I wasn't even though I would say I was a dabbler in computer science and really self-taught in terms of SEO, like many SEOs are, because back then there really wasn't like curriculum for SEO. I just happened to see that when all things are equal, when you basically everybody can create web pages, everybody can optimize the meta information on a page. The real gatekeeper, the real competitive difference maker were sites that were able to get links back to their site. And so in the SEO circles, I would start to say things, people would start to say like, well, content's really important. And I would say, meh, links. And so that kind of stuck around. And then, so that became a catchphrase. And it's funny because that really worked for about, at least 15 years until the recent changes where this is for the first time. And I don't, for people that are SEOs that are listening to this, I don't mean to diminish the other factors. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, and certainly Google slow played. I guess it's transparency about the impact of user signals. Like, so people that click through from search results to web pages. I think that plays a much larger role than I think anybody really gave it credit for, minus maybe a couple people like Rand Fishkin who called it out early. But the links really were the driver. I still think that they're relevant, but the way that, and I don't have to tell you this because you were in the cutting edge of all this stuff even before I was even aware of it. But the way that these the LLM technologies and even you could say maybe RAG, there's more link based grounding going on, but the technology fundamentally works differently, and so links don't play the same role in generative AI as they do in traditional search algorithms. And so I think it might be time to retire Mel Links. But then so I started applying Meh to everything. So I'd be like, Meh client experience. Like all things being equal, client experience actually is the most important thing. So that's where Meh came from.
And it's been an influence on me too, Guy, because like if you'll notice, and it'll be at the bottom of this podcast interview too, I have a little poll on every single interview, and it's like, did you like my interview with the guest? And then it's yes, no, and meh.
Oh,
Um,
love it.
so
I just love Meh.
homage to you. Um,
Thank you.
so there's a lot that's changed. I know we can't go over everything, and I probably will get some of this wrong, but the evolution of Google, like first off, you had organic links, and then you had like your advertising above it where you could pay to get at the top, and then they had three pack, and then they had like Google Local, which was another pack, and then you had advertising, you could Google local, and then you had organic push to the bottom, and let alone that people only look at maybe the first page of organic, let alone maybe going to the second page, but after that it drops off like a cliff. And then now we have this AI overview, and it seems to me, and again, as a layperson with respect to this stuff, it seems to me like people may not even look at ads or the local pack or anything. They just see the answer there and they're pretty much done. Like, how's this affected things?
It's really fascinating. So, just to contextualize, on most lower funnel lawyer lookup searches, so like personal injury lawyer Chicago or divorce lawyer Cincinnati, stuff like that, bottom of the funnel, very high intent. The user is looking for a lawyer. The pattern, the anatomy of the search engine result page typically looks like this. The first listing is typically a local services ad, which is a pay per lead ad unit that has a bunch of different features in it, like years in practice and star ratings and an image. Then there will be, and sometimes if there's not an LSA, like which is it seems to be rare and rare. And again, we can get into like what the motivations from Google are for ads versus organic. But then you'll see, to your point, you'll see an AI overview, which is like you said, it's basically it tries to deliver a generative answer to the query. In the bottom of the funnel lawyer lookup, that can take a variety of different forms. Sometimes it's just a list of law firms, some with no links. Sometimes it's a list of law firms with contextual links, like you might expect if you were just doing hyperlinking on your own website. Sometimes it's like comparison charts. Sometimes it's they're kind of quasi local packs, but they're they're generative local pack experiences. And then below that, you may get a traditional ad unit, and then you might get a traditional local pack, and then you'd get the quote unquote 10 blue links below that. I would also acknowledge that we partner with a company called Near Media that supports a lot of our user behavior testing. So we'll have people go out and we'll prompt them with like, hey, say you were in a car accident and you need to go find a lawyer, like what would you do? And then you watch them actually interact with Google. And it's extremely valuable because what marketing people like me and what lawyers and what the platforms say doesn't always reflect how people actually are using these technologies to do research or find lawyers. And so it's really illuminating. But what we've actually found is it's funny. The LSAs, not surprisingly, especially in a lower funnel lookup, they still command a lot of attention. They command a lot of both the click share and the choice share. So click share is just they tend to get clicked on when they're presented, and choice share, and this is the interesting one, when these people are doing this testing, they're also talking out loud about like what their experience is, like what are they looking for, what stands out to them. And what you find is that even in those contexts, recognizable brands, so firms that are, whatever they're doing, whether it's they're active in their local community or they're TV advertisers or radio advertisers or whatever they're doing, they're a known brand. They tend to get a disproportionate number of the choice and the clicks. And so we have really gotten away from, and again, we started out as SEO only. Like Attorney Sync we just did SEO. Fortunately, I had enough prescience to realize like, hey, SEO is like a very one trick pony kind of game. It's also, the results are extremely volatile. You're subject to algorithmic updates. So it's really out of our control. Like any SEO, I always tell people, I'm like, you want to know if you have a red flag with an SEO? If they're certain, there's a red flag, because there is so much uncertainty with what we do. Like I said, like we know directionally, like links matter and content matters and all this, and reviews and all this kind of stuff matters, but it's still, we're largely at the mercy of the engineers at the platforms when they make algorithm tweaks or they drastically change the interface altogether. So anyway, that's a very long-winded way of saying that we want our clients to be where people are looking. And interestingly, in a lot of our research, at least in the legal context, we are not seeing AIOs commanding the kind of attention, at least in those bottom of the funnel types of searches. Now, on a research-based query, where it's like, I'm just making something up. How long do I have to file my personal injury case? I think in that context, the AIOs, because to your point, they provide the answer. And so it stops the search. There's no click. Like the journey ends there because they got their answer. And so what I've tried to tell lawyers is like, you've really got to shift your mindset away from traditional notions of keyword ranking and really focus on like taking a diversified approach to your marketing, whether that's consider. And I'm not saying, there's different firms with different growth objectives at different growth stages should be deploying marketing resources in different amounts to different areas. But what I would say is that the key that the really thing that's come away that I've come away with in the last couple of years that I've been trying to spread the word on is you've got to diversify your approach. You do not want to be overly reliant on Google. You do not want to be overly reliant, certainly on organic. I would say you don't even want to be overly reliant on performance marketing, which is like direct response or like, someone does a search. I'd be mixing. I'd have a certain amount of your resources deployed to brand building as well, because again, at the end of the day, all that really matters is what's going on in the mind of the consumer when they start to do the research, they start to, before they even think they need a lawyer, what kind of questions are they asking? What's important to them? Where are they going? And I think more than ever, it's much more fractured. People go to social media. We're in Facebook groups where lawyers and consumers are making recommendations and referrals to each other. We see the impact of brand even on the direct response space. And so I think it's really important for folks to not try to overly invest in one particular channel, especially if that channel happens to be search, which is undergoing the most volatile change in its history. And by the way, wait, there's more, because we talked about AIOs. Google, for the first time in 25 years, changed the search box to include being able to ask, to use AI mode right in the search box. And so right now there's this big inside. I would love to be inside these conversations in Google, because even if you take Google at face value that it's kind of church and state between traditional organic results and ads, or organic and ads in general, which I think there's plenty of reason to be skeptical of that. But let's just say that we take it at face value. They know that their moneymaker is ads. And so things that they do to disrupt the search experience that say that cause ads to be less clicked or LSAs to be less chosen, they're a global publicly traded company. Their obligation is to shareholders. And if they lose that ad revenue, that's going to harm their shareholder value. And so they're very reluctant to do it. And so anyway, it's very interesting to see how they've kind of slow played, because people got to remember this. When OpenAI first made its big announcement, which by the way wasn't that long ago. I mean, what we're coming up on maybe 4 years. Everyone's like, "Where's Google on this?" Google had been doing this stuff well before OpenAI was even a thing. I mean, they'd been invested in AI long before OpenAI was even a concept. And so everyone was like, "Well, where's Google on all this stuff?" And again, I think my answer has always been, they're slow playing because 90 some percent of their revenue comes from search ads. And where do you put search ads in a conversational interface experience? And they're toying with that, and they've added ads now to AI mode, but I think they've been reluctant to go fully in on the generative experience. But they did add it to the search box, and I do believe that we're going to see more and more quote unquote AI mode surfaces from search as we move forward throughout this year. You're already seeing it. And that was really long-winded, so sorry to the editor.
No worries. And everyone, like, Guy really knows his stuff, right? So if you need
You got me
help.
nerding out on this stuff, so this is what I do. This is what we look at every day.
So like, yeah, I mean, a lot is changing, and I think that it is interesting how incentives play such a big role in everything that's playing out right now. Like behind the scenes, underneath it all, incentives. Google is kind of stuck with the incentives of wanting to keep the business it has versus the new business that's out there that OpenAI and Anthropic are just all out racing towards. But with the time we have left, I do want to ask you a couple of questions that I ask all my guests. The first one is like, clearly, you have a lot of interest in things that you're pursuing, like from looking at potential investments in new companies to your own podcast and running the company, Attorney Sync. What is the work-life balance? Is there one? Like, how do you cope with that?
I would say there's a couple of things that come to mind when I think about this. The first is that I found is there's a certain amount of just like intentionality about planning period. So things like calendar blocking, like I'm going to block off, this part of my day is going to be dedicated to this, making sure that I'm doing that for all dimensions of my life, my personal health, work, being a dad, being a husband. So much of it, you get caught up into doing the thing and you're not actually thinking about like hey, is my and I'm if you sense me hesitating, it's because I think the idea of balance has been misunderstood. Like balance to me doesn't necessarily mean like equal parts all things. Like you're gonna have every day is gonna be equal parts work, equal parts family life. It's just life doesn't work like that. You think about it, like even for me, like if I've got to go, if I get an opportunity to speak, like I got to travel, like, yeah, you know what? That's going to be time that I'm going to be away from my family. But it's being mindful about making those investments on a bigger picture and really being intentional. So calendar blocking is huge for me. The other one that I would say is boundaries. And so, look, I think, it's funny. This would be a conversation for another day, but part of me thinks we should just turn off social media and all this stuff altogether. Because net, I don't know. I think maybe it's doing more harm than good, but it is a great vehicle for us from a business development standpoint. But the point is here on the work-life balance is put your devices away. Find time to get to get away from your devices because again, the devices they're designed to addict you. They're going to make you deviate from this grand plan of balance that you have. And so the buzzword here is boundaries. Try to find times to have boundaries where you're being intentional about that. But, are there periods of time where I'm over indexing on work and under indexing on family? I'm sure there are. My wife also works full time. And so we've got, we're constantly juggling that. But I think so much of it is about the intentionality. Like if you pick those priorities and say, hey, look, over the course of a week, course of a month, we're going to budget time just like we'd budget money for these different dimensions of life. I found that it's been successful for me in terms of trying to navigate. I'll say navigate instead of balance because it's, balances. What does that mean? Does it mean equal? Does it mean like it's what you can tolerate that you're still making investments that you're being able to prioritize what's important to you through your values?
Well, I think you already anticipated the next question with what you said, but after doing all of these things, what makes it worthwhile for you?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, I moved back to my hometown. Part of that was to be around the people that I love. Like my mom's 75, and so memento mori. You never know. We're not promised tomorrow, and so being able to spend time with my family, with my sister and her kids. I've got a lot of good friends here, in my hometown. My wife's two best friends through a variety of serendipitous universe working itself out. They both moved back here. And so we've got a really nice community. And so for me, what drives me, professionally, there's nothing better than when we hit a client's growth objectives because I'm a small business owner. Our clients are small, for the most part, small business owners, smallish business owners. And so when they come back to me and say, hey, look, you helped us get this client. It was a very lucrative case for our firm, but we also able to help somebody. That's as close as I get to the experiences of representing somebody as a lawyer because I don't get to do that anymore. And so I'm super grateful when clients share those stories with me. But getting that positive feedback from clients about how we're changing their life, and then, but really at the end of the day, when I peel back the onion of like why I do what I do, it's to be able to share as much time as I possibly can with the people I care about. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. Like being able to designing my life to be able to go see my daughter's softball games. And I'm not perfect. There's some I'm not going to make, but, and I think some of that too is like, I think for listeners is, connecting the dots here, like, my dad wasn't around. And I think for me, it's really important for me to be around and to show up for my kids. And so being able to design a life and a business and a work life that provides me the flexibility to do that, no question that is a big part of my why.
Well, that's a wonderful life. Thank you for sharing yours, Guy.
Thanks for having me, Tom. It's so good to see you and looking forward to see you soon in real life.
I hope so. And for everyone watching, how can they keep in touch with you?
Well, I waste a lot of time on LinkedIn. You can go connect with me on LinkedIn. Check out the Lunch Hour Legal Marketing podcast if you're interested in legal marketing. And of course, you can go to attorneysync.com if you want to learn more about what we do at AttorneySync.
Awesome. Thanks again, Guy.
Thanks, Tom.
And for everyone out there watching, thank you so much for tuning in. See you next time.
Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.